She thought she was just enjoying a sunny afternoon in her own backyard pool. But when a neighbor called the cops on her, assuming she didn't belong, what followed left the entire community in shock. Because the woman they targeted wasn't just any resident. She was the new police chief. The sun was high in the sky, the kind of golden afternoon that begged people to relax. Chief Danielle Brooks had finally taken a rare day off. After weeks of back-to-back meetings, press conferences, and the endless paperwork that came with her new position as police chief, she wanted nothing more than to let the warmth of the sun melt away her stress. Dressed in a simple one-piece swimsuit, she stretched out by her backyard pool, a glass of iced tea resting on the table beside her. It wasn't just any pool, it was hers, part of the modest home she had worked her entire career to afford. Every tile, every plant along the fence, every chair on the patio had been chosen by her. It was her sanctuary, her reward for decades of service. Yet, while she felt at peace, someone else was watching. From behind the blinds of the house next door, her neighbor, Linda Matthews, frowned with disapproval. To Linda, the sight of a black woman sunbathing in what she assumed wasn't her property didn't sit right. Danielle didn't notice her. She was lost in the hum of birds and the laughter of children faintly echoing from a park nearby. But across the fence, suspicion was brewing. Linda whispered to herself, "She doesn't live there. No way." Fueled by assumptions and the entitlement of believing she had to protect the neighborhood, Linda reached for her phone. Within minutes, she was dialing 911, reporting a suspicious person trespassing and using someone else's pool. She didn't hesitate to embellish the story, insisting the woman looked out of place. On the other side of the call, dispatchers took her report seriously. Danielle, however, was still completely unaware. She dipped her feet in the cool water, leaned back, and smiled. Little did she know, the peace of her afternoon was about to be shattered, and the judgment of her neighbor would set off a chain of events that no one on that street would ever forget. The sound came first, two sirens that blipped quickly before going silent, as though announcing themselves discreetly. Danielle raised her head, puzzled, when she heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside her driveway. She slipped on a light cover-up, instinctively cautious, and walked toward the gate. There, parked at the curb, were two patrol cars. Officers stepped out, hands resting near their belts, scanning the property. "Excuse me, ma'am," one officer called, his tone professional but wary. "We got a call about a possible trespassing situation here." Danielle blinked, momentarily thrown off. "Trespassing?" she repeated, her voice calm but firm. "This is my home." The officer exchanged a quick look with his partner. "Do you have proof of residence?" Danielle felt a flicker of anger but kept her composure. Years in law enforcement had taught her how quickly situations could escalate, especially when assumptions clouded judgment. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "But before I show you anything, tell me exactly what the caller said." The younger officer cleared his throat, slightly uncomfortable. "Neighbor reported that someone who doesn't belong here was using the pool. Said you seemed suspicious." Danielle let out a slow exhale. "Suspicious," she echoed, the word bitter on her tongue. From the corner of her eye, she noticed movement. Linda, standing boldly at the edge of her yard, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold as if waiting for a prize. Danielle could see it in her neighbor's eyes, certainty that she had been right. "Officers," Danielle said, reaching into her bag on the patio chair, "I'll show you proof of ownership. But before I do, let me also show you something else." She pulled out her wallet, flipped it open, and revealed her badge. Danielle Brooks, police chief of this city. The silence that followed was thick, the kind that seemed to swallow the entire yard whole. The officers froze, their earlier suspicion melting into stunned embarrassment. One stammered, "Chief. I didn't realize," but the damage was already done. And the eyes of every neighbor peeking from behind their curtains knew this was no ordinary misunderstanding. This was prejudice, exposed in broad daylight. For a long moment, no one moved. The officers shifted uncomfortably, while Danielle stood tall, the sun catching the badge in her hand. Linda's smug expression faltered, her arms loosening as the realization began to dawn. Danielle turned toward the patrolman, her voice controlled but piercing. "You responded professionally, but think about why you were here in the first place. A black woman enjoying her own pool, and someone assumed I didn't belong. That assumption sent resources, put you on edge, and could have ended very differently if I hadn't been who I am." One officer lowered his gaze, shame written across his face. The other swallowed hard. "Chief, we understand. We'll make sure to note this." Danielle shook her head. "Understanding isn't enough. We need change." Then she turned her eyes toward Linda, who was now frozen in place. "And as for you," Danielle said, her voice carrying over the fence, "you need to ask yourself why you thought I didn't belong here. Why you felt entitled to call the police instead of walking over and introducing yourself like a neighbor." Linda opened her mouth, then closed it, searching for words that wouldn't come. The silence was louder than any excuse. Danielle could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders. It wasn't just about her. It was about every black man, woman, or child who had ever been questioned for simply existing in a space they rightfully occupied. Finally, she addressed the officers again. "I'll expect a full report on this incident. And I'll be taking it to the community meeting next week. It's time we talk openly about what happens when bias calls the police." With that, she dismissed them, walking back toward her pool with a dignity that not even prejudice could stain. Yet inside, her heart ached. Because even with her badge, her years of service, and her position of authority, she had been reduced in an instant to a suspicious person in the eyes of someone who chose not to see her humanity. The following week, the community center was packed. News of the incident had spread quickly, igniting conversations across the city. Residents, reporters, activists, and even city council members gathered, buzzing with curiosity and tension. Danielle stood at the podium, not in uniform but in a simple navy dress, her presence commanding respect. "Last week," she began, her voice steady, "my neighbor called the police on me. Not because I was breaking the law. Not because I posed a threat. But because I was a black woman in my own backyard." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some people shook their heads in disbelief, others nodded knowingly. "I'm not here to shame anyone," Danielle continued, glancing briefly at Linda, who sat pale-faced in the back row. "But I am here to tell the truth. These calls, these assumptions, cost lives. They create fear where none is needed, and they undermine trust between neighbors and law enforcement." She paused, letting her words sink in. "If this can happen to me, the chief of police, imagine how often it happens to those without a badge to protect them." Murmurs of agreement swept through the room. Danielle pressed on, her passion growing. "We need to build a community where people see each other as humans first, not as threats based on the color of their skin. That starts with conversations in our homes, accountability from our neighbors, and commitment from our officers." By the time she finished, the room erupted in applause. Reporters scribbled furiously. Parents whispered to their children. And Linda, who had stayed seated throughout, lowered her gaze, unable to meet Danielle's eyes. In the days that followed, the story spread across local and national news outlets. It sparked dialogues, policy reviews, and pledges for reform. But more importantly, it sparked change within the neighborhood itself. For the first time, neighbors who had lived side by side for years but barely spoken began to reach out, introducing themselves, sharing meals, and bridging divides. As for Danielle, she continued to lead, not just as a police chief, but as a symbol of resilience and truth. And though that sunny afternoon had been interrupted, it planted seeds that promised a brighter, more just tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes for more powerful real-life inspired stories. Comment below. Do you think neighbors should be held accountable for calling the police based on bias? Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that inspires kindness, challenges injustice, and spreads hope. Share this video with your friends and family, because conversations like this can change communities.